All right. Welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Wednesday, right? Wednesday, Thursday? It must be Wednesday. And I'm starting late today, not because Peter B. Collins is my guest. I did promote yesterday at the end of the program that Peter B., your humble host, would be the co-host today. And, not guest, special guest, whatever, co-host. I'll call him a co-host. But he couldn't make it, it turns out, today. So the plan is for Peter B., and I have him scheduled for tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. So we're certainly hoping to have Peter B. on, fingers crossed. And again, love to talk to Peter B., and he's so insightful, has great knowledge of the events of the day, and he also brings a historical perspective as well. So it's really, really informative, really really increases one's intelligence, I think, one's knowledge to have Peter B. on. But there was a specific reason, and I'll be going through that reason again today, which is I want his take on that question. Should we stop subscribing to, should we stop relying on the New York Times, because it just gets things so wrong, or at least its editorial writers and its op-ed writers, its opinions are so bad. They're so poorly presented and so so rife with inaccuracies and factual errors that undergird neoliberal and neocon warmonger positions. So it's so frustrating dealing with the paper of record. You get to the point where you say, or I ask, should we stop reading it? And that's what I really want to hear what Peter B. has to say. Because honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that question. I don't know if there is an answer. I mean, there's an answer, but who knows what the right answer is? So Peter B., I'm looking to for guidance as to this very important question. Frankly, a guidance as to the right answer, not necessarily guidance I'll follow, because I don't see how I could, and maybe this is the answer, I don't see how I could really continue to do my program without having the New York Times. I mean, sure I could. I don't need to. You look at all the other news sources, CBS, BBC. Obviously, we're looking very, very consistently, very closely at the Arab media for some kind of honest discussion of the atrocities committed there by the United States and the U.S. proxy, Israel, or perhaps it's the other way around, by Israel and its proxy, the United States. The worst place probably to be right now, I don't think there's really a lot of doubt, is Gaza. The death toll there now since the October 7 attack on Israel and let's be honest, it was. I think it was retaliatory strike by Hamas. I think that we have to understand what Hamas did in the light of 75 years of oppression, persecution, torture, murder by Israel of Palestinians. But yes, they did attack. Yes, they took a reprisal action, and a lot of civilians were killed. And Israel has used that to murder many, many, many times as many Gazans as were killed by Hamas on October 7. So there you see from Anadolu Ajansi, the death toll tops 55,600 as Israel continues its brutal assault on Palestinians. Why isn't the New York Times reporting this? See, this is the reason. This is the story of the millennium. This is the Holocaust of the 21st century. And it is the perpetrators are Israel and the United States. The New York Times failure in this area is as great as any journalistic failure we can imagine. I don't see any way around that. And to keep reading the paper in that light is at best problematic, because it goes to not just the integrity, the journalistic ethics, the honesty of the editorial page, but of the entire paper. And I think we just have to bear that in mind. Doesn't mean you don't read it, right? It's just a question that keeps occurring to me. This institution is so problematic. The death count, just terrible. 144 bodies brought into hospitals in the last 24 hours. 560 injured. So a very, very deadly day yesterday in Gaza. And give you the death count. It's on this page, but I'll present it to you from my, my sort of, what do you call it? I don't know. It's not even really an analysis. I just list them, on the page. But since October 7, Israel and the U.S. have killed, we saw the number 55,637 Gazans. A minimum, obviously, many reputable sources from Gaza, reporting from Gaza or that were in Gaza, are saying, no, that's a drop in the bucket in terms of the death count. But that's what the number we have that we can confirm. And then 5,334 now dead. Probably over 2,000 children from March 18 through today. And those children, their moms, their dads, their grandparents, their deaths are at the hands of Trump and Netanyahu. They are guilty. Yeah, I mean, that's where we are. There's no getting around it. There's no eliding it. There's no pretending it isn't the case. Just the way it is. And it's just horrific. We're talking elections today. I actually used the thumbnail to present the two nominees for Virginia governor. Now, the primary was yesterday, and I didn't cover it at all. I had planned to have on Alex Bastani, who had, I reached out to because he had reached out to me, and I was hoping to have him on. He ran for lieutenant governor. He did not prevail. I hoped to have him on. He did not come on. He did not want to talk Palestine. That was the bottom line. He just did not want to talk Palestine. And for that reason, I guess, maybe it's on me. I shouldn't have even told him. I should have just said, I shouldn't have even asked him. I shouldn't have brought it up. I know there's a lot of reluctance among a lot of politicos to go out there and talk about Israel, to talk about God. They just don't want to do it, and I understand why. They feel like it's a no-win. Whatever I say, it's going to offend somebody. My answer is a no-win is an opportunity for a big win if you're honest, if you speak from the heart, if you speak sincerely. People will see that. And of course, there's a lot of corrupt people out there. There's AIPAC, there's It's Bought and Paid For politicians, and it's sycophants, it's flunkies. Of course, they're going to never be swayed, but you have to hope that there's some good in the American people. There's good in the electorate. You want to represent them, don't you? So to the extent you can speak from the heart and say, yes, what Israel is doing is wrong. No, I would not support a Virginia law to endorse Israel, to condemn Hamas. I'm not going to do that. I won't do it. That would be, to me, a popular stance, a stance that would gain you votes rather than lose them. But we don't know. Bastani did not win his primary for lieutenant governor. Abigail Spanberger did win the Democratic primary for governor. She ran unopposed. She was basically had the red carpet rolled out for her by the Dem establishment. They're very comfortable with her. She got, as a congresswoman, she was consistently moderate. She steered a middle course. She never, to her credit, I want to say, she really never jumped on the woke bandwagon, for example. She didn't play identity politics cards. So I give her credit there. There's some positions she took I really don't like. But they tend to be, and one I have a real problem with, and she would have to explain before I would vote for her. I would not vote for Winsome Earl Sears. She is, I believe, closely tied to the evangelical movement. She is the lieutenant governor right now, but her governor, Glenn Youngkin, has steered a more centrist course than she would, and on some important issues. So I'm going to answer the question. I believe with some degree of confidence, Abigail Spanberger will be the first woman governor in Virginia. I would note that there has already been a black governor of Virginia, that L. Douglas Wilder. I believe he was governor back in the late 80s, early 90s, if I have my dates right. I believe he was elected when I was still in law school. It was kind of a big deal. He was a pretty moderate centrist Dem also, somewhat, maybe a little bit more to the left of where Abigail Spanberger is now, but not by any means a barn burner. So Spanberger, she's very likely to be your next Virginia governor. Virginia tends to go in the opposite direction of the president. So Trump a Republican, Spanberger a Democrat, probably win. Youngkin, the current governor, is a Republican. He won in 2021 when Biden had been elected about a year earlier, or exactly a year earlier, he had won the election. So they do tend to flip. So that's what we're likely to see, I believe, in Virginia. And I just want to go through Spanberger's points, a few comments about her real quick, about both of the two candidates. By the way, just got the email from, or the text from Peter, just a live update. Yes, he is confirmed tomorrow at 2 p.m. So some of the topics we're talking about today, we'll talk about tomorrow. If you want to talk to Peter, I definitely will entertain the calls. I hope you'll call in today as well if you have any thoughts. So yeah, Virginia, important state, getting to be a more and more populous state, somewhat of an interesting state, and we'll talk briefly about it before we get to what I guess for me ultimately is more compelling, the New York mayor's race, which is this Tuesday. And, you know, obviously there's plenty of time to talk about Virginia when, you know, as the leaves start to turn even, and that's still some time off. But before we get to New York, and let me say one other thing, I really do want to focus on Halitics as much as I can on elections. That's what we're talking about. We talked about the Jersey elections last week. We'll talk from now until the New York mayor's race primary, including after it. We're going to talk then, until then about it, because that's, to me, my theory of change is that you elect progressives. You elect, and let's even call them something else now, because the progressive brand has really been, in my view, pretty significantly tarnished by everyone calling themselves progressives, by people like AOC, who may stake out progressive positions on issues, but consistently support corporate Democrats. So they may be progressive in their heart of hearts, but they're not progressive in their actions, in their politics. So what does it even mean? So going from there, because progressive is really just what you say, but progressive populist to me means you actually act in a way that's consistent with belief that poor, struggling, and working people deserve a break in America. Abigail Spanberger here gets an F from the AGP Action, and that is a group that looks to rate lawmakers based on how pro-Palestine they are, how pro-life they are, how anti-genocide they are. So the better you are on this issue, maybe an Ilhan Omar is one of the best, or Rashida Tlaib would be the best. I presume she would get an A or close to it. None of them really deserve A's, by the way. They all voted for Hakeem Jeffries to be the House leader, their House leader, a terrible vote, an anti-Palestine and anti-life vote. But Spanberger gets an F. I think it's a little unfair. I looked through a record. I'm not going to go through all of it. I think it's a little bit unfair. For example, she voted, I believe, against the Holocaust Museum definition of anti-Semitism, and that was the right thing to do. She was right to vote against it. That definition would define anti-Semitic acts to include criticism of Israel and various claiming that the state of Israel should not exist, which is not anti-Semitic. And there are plenty of Jews who don't believe in the state of Israel either. So I don't agree quite with the F. I think there are a few areas where Spanberger wasn't awful. There are definitely much worse people like Josh Gottheimer than Spanberger. But she's not great. She's pretty mediocre to worse than that on this issue. Thing is, when you're in the state house, when you're in the governor's mansion, yes, it's an important issue. Yes, genocide is the issue of our day. But it's less crucial, in my opinion, than your position for a state lawmaker. It's less dispositive than it would be for a national leader. And that, again, I was begging for Kamala at some point to just throw us anti-genociders, pro-ceasefire folks a bone and just say, yes, what Israel's doing is appalling. It's wrong. I cannot support that. I would not support that if you elect me. If she just said that, I probably would have voted for her, despite her really bad record on everything else. So Spanberger, I have to hear more how she stands on Israel running for national office. State office, meh, not great, not great. Now, this is another area where she really is weak, very weak. But I'm willing to listen to her explanation for it. Why did Spanberger come out against repealing Virginia's right to work law? So the right to work law is the right to work for less. And that means that even if you have a union representing you, even if you have collective bargaining that protects you from all manner of unjust actions by your employer, even if a union's there for you, sues for wrongful termination, protects you, doesn't matter. You don't have to pay your dues. You can just simply say, I'm not going to pay my union dues, which I don't think are that high. I think I looked at my wife's pay stub, and it's on a sliding scale. It's a percentage of your salary. It's not a particularly high percentage. I think she paid, I don't want to overstate it, somewhere around $800 last year in union dues. So I don't want to understate it either. I think that's about right. And that seems like a lot, right? $800, we all could. But you know what? The salary that the union negotiated collectively was much higher than $800 difference than it would have been, right? If she didn't have that union with good lawyers, with determined advocates fighting to make sure teachers get a decent deal from the school board, she would have gotten a lot less. So the union has really protected her, has really made life a little easier. You feel a little more secure. Unions are really important for older workers, for senior workers, because employers invariably and understandably, I don't want to be condemning them, but employers look to cut out the expensive fat, right? Anything that's costing you a lot of money is going to be a target when you're looking to cut costs. And older workers cost more. The theory is, well, they contribute more. They have knowledge. They have information. They're more valuable. But at some point, they're not, for at least according to some employers. Now, I get you're running a restaurant, you're running a business where you require high energy people. You require folks who have a lot of get up and go. They're stronger. Yeah, then maybe someone's getting a little older. They're not able to do the job. That's not the case in education, with very few exceptions. You need to protect older, better paid teachers. And in the end, all the teachers benefit from it. So the union is incredibly valuable. The right to work says we're going to cut the legs out from unions. We're going to say, hard-pressed employees who still aren't making very much money, they see a chance to save a few $100s every year, not fund their union. Maybe they buy the anti-union rhetoric that they're hearing all the time. So they'll just say, I'm not going to pay my dues. I'll still get the benefit, but I won't have to pay the dues. It's a very, very bad law, and it's cost a significant amount of union density in our country. So Spanberger is just wrong here. Now, it's not, I'd hear her out on why she voted against it, only because I really have problems with her opponent. And if there weren't a Green Party candidate running, I would consider it. But this was a very, very bad position by Spanberger. Now, I will say one other point. Her argument is going to be, I know what it is. Well, we would lose jobs. She won't say this. I will say it. There is a race to the bottom. If we repeal right to work, then employers will relocate in Virginia, from Virginia to Alabama, to South Carolina. I think North Carolina may still have right to work, may not have right to work. I'm not sure, but they'll relocate is what Spanberger's saying. Now, we haven't seen that. We have not necessarily seen that happen in pro-labor states, but we haven't not seen it. For example, Boeing determined to move out of pro-labor Washington state to move its operations to the South. So we do see that. So it's not a completely absurd position. The real answer is you need the federal government to enforce protections for every union needed and for every employee. You need the federal government to step in. I don't like Spanberger's position on this. I will be very reluctant to support her because of it. That said, when Earl Sears is very, very problematic, and I'll show this is from NBC News. I mean, I'm not usually a big believer in this. I usually deprecate social issues. They're not as important. Generally, they're less crucial, in my opinion, than wealth and income redistribution. Nothing to me is more important than taking money and power and influence away from the wealthy and providing it to poor, struggling, working people. So any candidate who is foursquare for doing that, I'm going to support. But Earl Sears isn't like that either. No, she's not. I mean, her record on social issues is very poor, but she's not a champion of labor in any way either. And when you look at these social issues, they're important. They're not like sort of de minimis. These are big deal items. And this is why also I think Spanberger wins. I think she will be your next Virginia governor. And we'll just go through this very, very quickly, and we'll get to the New York mayor's race, which I think many viewers may be slightly more interested in. Maybe not. I don't know. But the issues that she really that she has showed she's more conservative even than Youngkin, the Republican governor. She opposes same-sex marriage completely. She doesn't believe in it. She's morally opposed to it. And I just, I don't think that's defensible. I don't think that's a defensible position. I don't see any legit argument against letting two people of the same sex get married. People want to get married, let them get married. What do you care? Two adults, they get married, period. And I see good reason to allow it. Some people are born, and I think you are born, right? Your sexuality is what you're born, is how you're born, or something like that. It's probably encoded, although I guess women are a little more fluid. Their sexuality tends to be a little more fluid than male sexuality. But generally, your sexuality, your sex, and your sexuality are determined at or before birth. I can't see any reason to say to two men who want to get married or two women, you can't get married. It just seems cruel. And I know it's informed by her religiosity. That doesn't make it okay. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I mean, it's fine when you're in church, but it's not fine when you're in the governor's mansion. She does not deserve. This is a position that really should should exclude her from being the governor. And I think it will. I think it'll hurt her a lot. I don't think she's going to win in part because of this. And remember, Youngkin was for same-sex marriage. I mean, it's kind of been decided. She wants to go back. That doesn't make sense to me. Now, some issues I get where it's like a zero-sum game. This is not a zero-sum game. Two men getting married doesn't stop a straight couple from getting married. It's not like there's only so many marriages. And if two women decide they want to tie the knot, then a woman and a man can't. That one marriage, there's a certain number of issues, you can issue a certain number. Now, this is very different. Let me just make the point. Very different from trans and sports issue, which is a zero-sum game. Every gold medal that goes to a trans athlete doesn't go to to an athlete who was born or conceived the sex that they're competing against. That's a zero-sum game. Now, I know there's an argument. Well, in California, what they did is they gave out 2 golds. So when a trans athlete won in the latest state championships, they actually gave out 2 gold medals. But see, that's okay. I mean, at least you're not taking it away from somebody. At least it's not like a limited number of resources. But on the other hand, it does kind of reduce the value of that gold medal. And it's kind of performative then. It's sort of like, well, we're going to let you race. I heard trans people say, well, this isn't right. It's sort of like you're saying we're in a different category, that we don't win. We didn't beat the girl, or he, she, they didn't beat the girl because the girl also got a gold medal. And you know what? I think they're right. So the answer is, don't compete against girls if you're a trans athlete. Don't compete against girls. Don't compete against women. That's the answer. There's only so many gold medals. There's only so many places on a varsity team. There's only so many scholarships. That's totally not the case with marriage, and therefore, there's zero argument, I believe, to justify her position, and I would vote, and I will not vote for Winsome Earl Sears to be governor of Virginia, especially because, and including because she's not good on economic issues, which are, in general, much more important to me. Look at this, 15-week ban on abortion. That's really bad. I don't like it. What is that? Less than 4 months, 3 months? A little over 3 months, right? That's not good. I mean, if you said it was a 6-month ban, I'd oppose it. If you said it was an 8-month, because I don't think it's the state's role. And especially because there's health issues and all that. I don't like those, very late stage abortions, but I don't think they really happen. It's just a load of crap. So, if you want to say, okay, after 7 months, after viability, and we're not talking about viability in a incubator. I mean viability where you could live outside the womb, the baby could live outside the womb. Yeah, I would support that. You want to pass a law that says you can't, if a doctor is performing an abortion and the baby is viable, then you can't kill the baby. Totally with that. Good. Take the baby out, have your C-section, and then give the baby up for adoption. I would be okay with that. 15 weeks? No. Less than that, she wants a ban at 6 weeks. And let's be honest, she would ban it. I hate to put words in people's mouths or assume bad positions on people's part, but I think she would be for a total ban. So no, Winsome Earl Sears is not acceptable to me. The Republican nominee for governor, and I'm pretty confident the Virginia electorate will feel the same way. And despite there's so much skepticism of the Democratic Party, there's so much cynicism about it, and all rightly so, I think Spanberger will win. I will note that Spanberger's positions have been somewhat well-defined, which is very different from so many Democrats. Like, think of how Kamala Harris did everything possible not to take a stance on anything, to wordsmith everything. Same with Hillary. What Abigail Spanberger has been real clear. Hey, she said, I want cheaper drug prices. She's voted for a bill to make, to negotiate. That's a good thing. She voted to expand Medicaid. She voted for more funding for Medicare. She's not great, but she's got some legitimate legislative progressive chops. So we'll keep following that. We'll see what happens in Virginia. Now let's move to the main event. The New York mayor's race coming right up. And in this corner, there's 4 corners in a boxing ring. It's not a ring, actually. It's a square. There's 4 corners. And in one corner, you have here Zohran Mamdani, the young insurgent challenger. The crowd's behind him. You've got the old, corrupt Andrew Cuomo in that corner. You've got Brad Landers kind of coming up on the outside, although that would be a horse race. term. And I don't know who we've got on the fourth spot, but we'll talk a little bit about Lander Day. Let's first, though, go back over just very, very briefly. Yesterday, I went through this absurd editorial by the New York Times that concludes with the admonition that you have to include Andrew Cuomo on your ballot to stop Zohran Mamdani from being mayor. And there's been a lot of good coverage of it. The Hill went over this. I thought they did a decent job with it. The Due Distance Bros did a live stream today, a podcast, and I recommend that. It was pretty much all Russell who did that segment, and he made pretty much the exact same points I did. I mean, this isn't rocket science, folks. There's very clear and obvious reasons why Cuomo shouldn't be mayor. There's very good reasons that we should consider Mamdani as the best choice, and it couldn't be more clear that the New York Times editorial is absurd and is a good reason not to reject Cuomo. Not to reject Mamdani, but even though it calls for canceling Mamdani, but a good reason to cancel the New York Times. All right, let's go through. I thought this would be most instructive at this point. Just some of the comments. I really loved some of these comments that the New York Times got in response to their absolutely horrible, abysmal, what was the word I used? Atrocious. It wasn't atrocious. It was, well, shameful, but that wasn't the word either. Now I can't remember. Appalling. It was appalling. It's an appalling editorial in support of endorsement, non-endorsement of Andrew Cuomo. By the way, before we get to that, again, I'm going to just urge you, please, if you can, when you can, do subscribe. We need you to subscribe. Kind of keeps that, keep the numbers growing. And Halitics are seeing a bit of that growth. Really appreciate that. And don't forget to click like. Let me make sure I get the like. There we go. So your like button is right there on your screen. And so, there it is. And if you want to call me, I'll take your call. 240-242-5646. Final word, folks, before we get to our final advertisement here. I don't sell product or any of that. But I do hope, if you haven't yet done so, you will join Halitics on Facebook. And that's a great place to have a dialogue, continue the discussion. A lot of good intellectual ferment there, including back and forth about the incipient war with Iran, which would be one of the most horrible things I can imagine happening. And it looks like Israel is bound and determined to drag us into that war. From James on the endorsement quasi of Andrew Cuomo. First of all, I could have written this myself. We're in a radically dark place as a city. We need to take risks. And he goes on to respond to their argument against Mamdani. Mamdani offers an agenda that remains alluring among elite progressives. I love that. Who's a more elite progressive than the New York Times, right? Who more represents the highly educated, well-paid managerial class? That's the elites, right? Even more so, you might say, well, if you're like an entrepreneur, right, a Facebook, a Mark Zuckerberg, you're an elite. And sure you are. He's elite not just because he's, a multi-billionaire. Of course, that's the biggest reason. But hey, the guy went to Harvard, super high educated, right? Top Ivy League school. So elitism includes a little more, some kind of a high school dropout wildcatter in Western Oklahoma who makes their pile extracting oil. I'm not going to necessarily put them in that New York Times elite class. I'm thinking your Paul Weiss partners, your big shot investment bankers, your tech bros. Those are your New York Times elites. And they look to the New York Times for guidance. The idea that they're the ones who find Mamdani's agenda alluring is, as this writer points out, farcical. Mamdani's swelling voter base is made up of a multicultural mass of people voting to tax the elite, right? Those elites, those New York Times elites, are the ones who are dead set against Mamdani. And I know Mamdani has not connected with black voters. I find that so upsetting, so disappointing. I think there's just the suspicion. There's the suspicion that if the Howard Beach crowd supports you, there's something in your agenda that's bad for black people. And they're also very poorly served by some of their leadership, black New Yorkers. Al Sharpton, for example, came out and endorsed Cuomo. Terrible, terrible thing. The matter of experience is relevant, but New York will remain on a slow decline into economic disparity. Well, it's already there, so long as we keep electing corrupt neoliberal maniacs like Adams, Cuomo, and Bloomberg. 100%. 100%. And let me again just say, hey, go through the due dissidence. If you're still curious about why Andrew Cuomo was such a terrible, terrible choice for New York, the due dissidence pros go through it. Pretty much the same arguments that I make. They flesh out a few things, I think, a little more than I did. For example, they really go through how Cuomo, as governor, really screwed over New York City. So some of the problems that the New York Times identifies as needing to be addressed were caused by the very person they're saying should be the governor, should be the mayor. It's a farcical take. They endorse, they speak somewhat highly of Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg is a major reason, and they go into this, the due dissidence pros, a major reason for the inequality, the unaffordability crisis New Yorkers are facing. And also Bill de Blasio had a real good interview in the New York Times, actually, where he goes into why Cuomo is a big part of the problem and why Mamdani is the right answer at this time. De Blasio did endorse Mamdani. So, by the way, did Bernie now, and we've already talked about the AOC endorsement. This is a really, really good comment here. I'm not sure who wrote this, but a real part of this, in other words, a real part of how, this is the same comment, right? This is the second page. The guy who was saying that the New York Times take is farcical. So he goes on to say, a real part of this is that all of our largest institutions, like the New York Times, are aligned with corporate interests. Yes, this is what we have to bear in mind. It's not just that they have a different opinion. It's not just that maybe they're relying on different facts, or they look at some things, I look at something else, you look at some third thing. No, they're corrupt. They're corrupt. They're aligned with the billionaire class. That's who butters their bread. That's why their opinion is so awful. More on why Cuomo is and these are, by the way, these were all super popular. Like I ranked I sorted the comments by popularity. So these were like the most popular takes, or many of, not only, I mean, I cherry picked, to be honest, but these are most popular takes of in the New York Times with respect to their editorial for the mayor's race, suggesting that Cuomo would be a better mayor than Mamdani. So in a city with at least 600,000 Muslims, Cuomo could not confirm he's ever been to a mosque. He's also confused Muslims with immigrants. So how, given these important facts, somebody who really doesn't understand the city, hasn't lived in the city in decades, how come, what's up with the editorial board endorsing the sexual harasser? It's so upsetting, really. And what upsets me is not that the Times, who cares? F the New York Times. I mean, I care because they're powerful, they're influential. But what bothers me is that this is a perfect example of why you shouldn't trust the paper, why you should look at it askance, why you should consider canceling it. And instead, people will read this and think, well, maybe the Times has a point. That's what bothers me. That's what goes against what I'm trying to do here. That commenter goes on to say that this endorsement is one of the most disappointing things they've ever read in the New York Times. A final comment I just want to share. These New Yorkers who commented really make some good points. And I think I tried to only get New Yorkers comments, but maybe mine, I tried to comment, they wouldn't post it, which is interesting because some of these are just as pithy and just as ironic as mine was. Here's from Catherine, and 292 recommend this. Mamdani, she quotes the op-ed. I talked about this yesterday, but she does a really juxtaposes the phoniness, the dishonesty, the disingenuousness. Boy, that's a lot of syllables. Of the New York Times editorial page. Mamdani, according to this editorial, lacks the instinct for compromise that has made Sanders, his fellow democratic socialist, effective. And then she quotes 5 years ago, compromise is anathema to Sanders. Only his prescriptions are the right ones, even though most are rigid, untested, and divisive. So what a laugh riot. When it suits the editorial page's purpose because they're endorsing someone else, they'll compare Mamdani unfavorably to the popular Bernie Sanders. But when Sanders is on the ballot and you can vote for him, they're going to trash him in incredibly dishonest fashion, too. In fact, Bernie's prescriptions are hardly untested, and they're not rigid in the least. Raising taxes on the rich, we had a 90+% tax rate on the rich in the 50s and 60s, and we had an incredibly booming economy then. That's untested. He calls for Medicare for all, government-provided health care. That works in the entire world except for here. That's untested. It's just, I mean, they're a laugh riot. Is what they are, and not intentionally. I like Mamdani. If I were in New York and if I could vote in that election, I would be voting for Mamdani first. I will say, our old friend Ezra Klein, whom I've trashed, and remember we did this. Kirsten Stade and I did the video about Ezra Klein's Abundance book, along with his co-writer Thompson, and we really went after it and really made points about why we had huge problems with it. I won't say in any way that Ezra Klein has redeemed himself with this piece. It's going to be in this weekend's New York Times Magazine. I believe it's the cover. And, that's good. I won't say he's redeemed himself for Abundance by any means, but this is a good opinion piece. Brad Lander, the comptroller, also running for mayor. I would vote for him if I didn't vote for Mamdani. If Mamdani weren't on the ticket, I would vote for Lander. I would certainly put them 1-2. Lander doesn't belong in jail. Does he belong in City Hall? Let's go through this. This is a pretty good piece by Klein. He puts a lot into it, and I want to give him his due. So Cuomo's whole pitch, by the way, Klein not buying into any of this crap about how great Cuomo is. Cuomo's whole pitch is that he's got the experience and the relationships to get things done. Okay, for this to be true, he needs to repair those relationships that he's destroyed, the people he's alienated. And earlier in the article, Klein goes into that. He points out all these honorable public servants in the city and the state who hate Cuomo, who think he's deplorable, who think of him as only a wholly corrupt opportunist. So how, asks Ezra Klein very intelligently, could he possibly work with others to get things done? He couldn't. He hasn't tried to reach out to the people he alienated. He hasn't tried to make things better for the voters that whose policies who he betrayed with his policies. And he notes that Brad Lander, who has a long time history in New York City politics, and certainly crossed paths with Cuomo on occasion, cross-endorsed with Mamdani, not with Cuomo. And he also criticizes, I think, far too lightly Cuomo's bid to make the campaign referendum on Mamdani's views on Israel. He calls that cynical. I think it's disgraceful. I think it's despicable. I think it's, in other words, because Mamdani's saying, hey, I'm not going to be the mayor for Israel. I'm not going to be going to Israel. I'm not going to be endorsing a Jewish state. No. And for Cuomo to try to use that against Mamdani is indeed despicable. It's not just cynical. It's disgusting. It's a reason, if you needed one, to vote against Cuomo, to not list Cuomo. Of course, the New York Times opinion page doesn't mention that. Now, I don't love this. I don't agree with what Klein writes here, but I don't hate it. Electing Mamdani, Cuomo's main foil, would be a high-risk bet. I don't see that. What's so high risk about it? I think he's getting to the point that Mamdani is young and relatively inexperienced. Not that inexperienced, 3 terms as a Queens state delegate, but yeah, he hasn't been in government for 20, 30 years. Of course, I could view that as a major positive, actually, and I do. But he also says it's not a crazy bet. And he does make the point, hey, look, New York is enormous. There's 7+ million people. It's not just enormous in terms of the population. The area of New York City is just physically huge. I don't know if you've ever driven around. Queens and Brooklyn are just massive. And Staten Island is off in the down, way below them in the practically in the Atlantic Ocean. It is just incredible in terms of the physical size, let alone the most populous city in the country. So yes, I think it does require a level of understanding and experience. But he's saying, hey, it's worth it. It's worth taking the bet, maybe. Communication matters. Communication matters. He's a good communicator. He gets his point across very well. And Klein acknowledges, while he doesn't necessarily agree with all of Mamdani's positions, he acknowledges there's something to them. So I give Klein credit, while at the same time he is trashing, and rightfully so, Cuomo. So again, here's a neo-lib, Ezra Klein, who's actually providing a pretty good discussion and analysis of this election. Brad Lander exists between Mamdani and Cuomo. He has far more experience and better relationships inside New York City government than Cuomo does. Well, everyone does. And he has a far deeper record at pushing progressive change through the machinery of the city than Mamdani does. That's because he's older. He's been around and he was the comptroller. But Mamdani, we talked about this yesterday, for example, did have that initiative. He did get through the free bus initiative that worked well. And then he goes on to talk about how, and you've probably heard of this, I haven't mentioned it yet, but we will now, Brad Lander got arrested. And this, I want to contrast a little bit to Alex Padilla, the California state senator, who was also arrested. He was arrested, or he was taken down. Neither one was really arrested, by the way. The charges, well, I guess arrested means stopped. So they were stopped by police, but they weren't ultimately charged. Let's put it that way. They weren't charged. Padilla was arrested when he, was trying to ask Kristi Noem questions, Department Secretary of Homeland Security, really going after her. I wouldn't say really, but, he was going to ask her questions. And it was I wouldn't say performative exactly, but it wasn't clear to me what, I guess he was trying to get information. And that's fine. That's good. I'm not saying it wasn't a good thing. It was good. But look what Brad Lander was doing. He is accompanying a migrant that ICE is trying to arrest. He's trying to protect the worst thing that Donald Trump is doing, that he has done, well, at least until the genocide, until possibly war with Iran. The worst thing he did over and over and over is the abusive treatment, the callous disregard for immigrants, for their families, for their feelings, for their safety. The inhumane treatment of immigrants, the worst thing that Donald Trump has done, at least until very recently, in my opinion, as president. the worst. And Brad Lander is there with an immigrant. He's trying to protect him. He's saying, hey, you want to arrest this guy? Produce a warrant. He doesn't yell. He doesn't attack. But he doesn't let go of the man he's trying to protect either. Now, this is somebody that I think really deserves a lot of respect. I think this is the kind of action that we want to see in our leaders, in people who we vote to important positions. So, when I said to my son when this happened, I said, is this the last? Because when he told me, my son said, hey, Brad Lander got arrested for trying to stand up to ICE. And my first response was, what is this, a last-ditch bid for relevancy, right? Because I think Lander probably thought he had a real good shot at winning this election, and it looks like he's not. And I give him a gazillion tons of credit, by the way, because he could be angry, he could be resentful that Mamdani, who's this relative newcomer, newbie, and neophyte, is ahead of him, but he's not. Or if he is, he probably is, but he's above that. So I was wrong. I was wrong to be cynical. This is this is heroic. I cannot say enough about what Brad Lander did here. And for this reason, you want to put him first on your ballot. I mean, look, it's your ballot. You're in New York. You do whatever you like. But I get it. I get it. But if you put him first, please make sure you put Mamdani second, because it's got to be one of them. Or, I mean, anybody, right? Put is it Adrian Adams? But put Mamdani on your ballot and don't put Cuomo. I'm good with Brad Lander as your mayor. That's fine. I think he would be a good mayor based on this, if nothing else. But make sure you get Mamdani on that ballot, because if it comes down to Mamdani and Cuomo, Mamdani needs every single vote he can to defeat that corrupt sleazeball, that scuzzy Cuomo. Here's the arrest. So look at how he is holding him. He's trying to protect him. It is amazing. I hate when those ads pop up like that. It's really awesome. You can't really see it. It's kind of covered up. But remember what Klein how he described it. He says he holds on to the guy.
Keep going. Back up. Sorry. Back up. That won't make this difficult. Sorry. Back up. Just back up. Let's not cause any problems.
I will let go when you show me the judicial warrant. Where is it? Sir, where is the warrant? I would like to see the warrant. I would like to see the warrant. And then
see, he's right there in the middle. They're holding his arm back. He's got his blue shirt on. And the agents there are holding him back, and he's saying, I want to see the warrant. I want to see the warrant.
I would like to see the warrant.
Right, that's the man. There he is. Yeah, there it is, right there. Yeah. See, the blue shirt. They're right next to each other. He's holding on. He's trying to prevent them from taking this man away.
Let's go!
It's really heroic.
Let's go. You don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. Sir, you don't have the authority to arrest U.S. citizens. You don't have I'm not obstructing. I'm standing right here.
I mean, this is fascism, what we're seeing. This is, and I get it. People say, well, you can say whatever you want. You can call it fascism. That means it's not fascism. No, it's fascism. These thugs, these armed thugs with badges are going around in our city, pushing around elected officials, pushing around immigrants, often totally without justification, without any consequences. You trust the corrupt Andrew Cuomo, somebody whose policies are very similar in a lot of ways to Donald Trump's. You trust him to stand up to Trump? Come on. All right. It's time. New York needs a new mayor. It needs a new direction. Eric Adams is an abysmal failure, a corrupt police flack, basically, over his head as mayor. the last thing you want is to replace him with Andrew Cuomo. Zohran Mamdani, Brad Lander. Those are two great options. And look, I like Adrienne Adams too. I think she'd be great too. I don't have a video of her being arrested by ICE, but she would be a great mayor too. All right, 240-242-5646. I want to just put one more slide up here from the Ezra Klein pro Mamdani, pro Lander, because in the end he says Lander's really good, but he also says some good things about Mamdani, unlike the New York Times editorial board. And here's what he says about Mamdani. There are moments when Mamdani makes arguments I've been waiting to hear the left make for a long time. Oftentimes, the very things we should care about in the left, we've allowed the right to make their own concerns. And he says bureaucracy, efficiency, and waste. Remember, that's the whole point of Klein's pretty reductive book, pretty meaningless to my way of thinking book. What was it called? Abundance. But he does say, hey, Mamdani's talking about bureaucracy and efficiency and waste and how we have to do a better job delivering for the people without corruption, without, obviously, nobody would be worse than Cuomo in terms of inefficiency and waste. And he also speaks about the importance of quality of life issues. And absolutely, he's right. But I think, and good on is what Tom Hartman always says. Fine, whatever. Good on Klein for recognizing this in Mamdani and praising it. But I think it also goes to kind of the hollowness of the Klein formula, the formulation that somehow the democratic cities, progressive, supposedly cities, are the ones that have all these hoops you have to jump through and that are preventing us from unharnessing the power of the private sector. It's just not true. It's just false. And Mamdani's saying, hey, we care about efficiency. We want to deliver, as many dollars as we can to the people rather than to, for-profit contractors. And I think where Klein gets it wrong is assuming that somehow that's not a progressive ideal. That's not a populist goal. It is. It is. And to the extent it's been hijacked, not really by real progressives, not really by real populists, but again, by people like Bloomberg, by people like Ronald Reagan, by anyone who wants to outsource and offshore and hire private contractors to do work, by Doge. That's a recipe for incredible inefficiency, not efficiency. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Just a few more comments. We're just about at the end of the hour. And again, remember, don't forget, tomorrow, Peter B., you're not going to want to miss it, 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific. And I just wanted to highlight this. It's getting an awful lot of play on the internet. You can see this is from X there, Tucker Carlson, 13.1 million views when this was posted. And the reason I wanted to post it is because to me this just highlights the ridiculousness of those who argue that Democrats or liberals have some kind of monopoly on morality, and that anyone who votes for Trump, anyone who votes MAGA, anyone who votes Republican is morally suspect. And maybe they are. I mean, we're all morally suspect. So, that's the wrong way. But is morally inferior, right? That you've demonstrated that you have no morality. And Carlson is better than 95% of us. The real divide isn't between people who support Israel and those who support Iran. And I love how he brings Iran into this. It's so important. Or the Palestinians. The real divide is between those who casually encourage violence, which is exactly what Israel is doing, and those who seek to prevent it. Between warmongers and peacemakers. Who are the warmongers? They're anyone who's calling Trump today to demand airstrikes. By the way, like Chuck Schumer, right, where he called him a taco, a chicken out guy, because he wasn't going after Iran. Tragically, it looks like he will. And he Carlson, to his credit, calls out the right. Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, who's a really horrible person, Rupert Murdoch, I don't know who Ike Perlmutter is, and Miriam Adelson. At some point, they will all have to answer for this, but you should know their names now. Yeah, no, 100%. Carlson nails it. All right, 240-242-5646. I have a story here, a couple of stories that I could get to. Yeah, let me just highlight this. Maybe I'll talk about this with Peter B as well. We'll see. I don't know if he's going to want to, but it could say sort of a feel-good fun. Now, remember, Peter B is a disc jockey. And I don't mean that, he's played music throughout his life on radio. So I will talk to him not just about politics, but also I want to get his take on Sly Stone and Brian Wilson, both of them whom we lost just in the past week, and two giants of rock and pop music over the past 75 years, right? Well, I don't know, 75, I guess the Beach Boys emerged in the early 60s, so that's be 63. Giants in the past 65 years. The 10 worst beers in the world. I saw this post, I guess someone just posted it, and I went through it because I'm a beer drinker, I'm a beer guy, I love beer, and I was somewhat curious, and this definitely is clickbait. Look at when it was published. It's really old. So I'm sure these aren't the 10 worst beers now, but the bottom line, my takeaway, I think, is still valid. They list, and we'll see. I'm not going to go through each of them. I'm not going to expose these horrible beers to your mockery or to mine. But I have a problem with this. I actually really, really do. I'm sure, I don't know that I've even drank any of the beers that they list, but here's what in fact, I haven't, because I don't drink these kind of beers. But without further ado, let's dive into their updated list. Beer Advocate, which is a very reputable source, very good source, absolutely. Of 2023. Why was that published on the 16th? This is of 2023, so it is recent. All of which happen to be, I guess they keep updating it, American Light Lagers. So that is their worst beers, are all American Light Lagers. And they put ice and stuff. And I'll tell you what, I have a big problem with that. There's, I post on Facebook, there's plenty of really bad Euro lagers. They're just awful. I don't like that you're going to just go after like Natural Light or Coors Ice or whatever it is. Because to Bud Ice, because those aren't really beers at all. I mean, I guess they're technically considered beers, but I would have greatly preferred if Beer Advocate's worst list was like just your standard issue, what you go into the supermarket and it just says beer. It doesn't say ice. It doesn't say malt liquor. It doesn't say, I don't think they list anything like light. So, a lot of people think Heineken, it smells bad. It has that skunk. Is that one of the worst? Maybe it is. I don't know. If that's your take, give it to us. A lot of people say, oh, Heineken's really good. It's European. I don't know. It's not my favorite. I probably wouldn't say it's one of the worst. It's good on tap for sure. Is Bud. I think Bud's one of the better giant American beer brands. Hams. What are your worst beers? Come on. Ice, Coors, Light. Those aren't beers at all. So I have a big problem with this list. I don't think it was very informative. And I hope I was informative. I hope this program was worth listening to, worth watching. If it was, even if it wasn't, even if you hated it, if you're hearing me now, I do really, really ask you, please do subscribe. And let's see, there it is. There's my subscribe button. And you can see the bell ring, so you'll get notified if you click notifications as well. I will be back tomorrow. It will be a California-centric program, but we will talk about the New York mayor's race. We'll talk about the New York Times, and hopefully we'll talk to you on Halitics.